limited time, and so, David, I don't want to get in your way. Iowans are getting to know you more and more as you travel all across our great state with 99 counties, and I know you've covered a bunch of counties already, and you're just rolling along, so welcome to WHO.
Jamie, great to talk to you. I was happy to see you last night in Dickinson County. That was my 75th county. In some counties I've been to 2 or 3 times, but I've seen you a lot lately.
That's great, and the people enjoyed your comments. They enjoyed your passion. Tell us a little bit about who David Young is as Iowans get to know you a little bit more every day.
Well, I'm a 6th-generation Iowan. You know, my great-great-great-grandparents came out here from Germany to Pocahontas County because they heard of something called opportunity, the American dream, freedom, our rights given to us by God in the Constitution. And so eventually the family moved down to Dallas County, to Van Meter, where my grandparents had Young's Cafe, small business owners. My parents met in high school, and I lived the small-town life, paper boy, 4-H, Cub Scouts, Little Leagues, and, you know, there's more common sense on any street corner in Van Meter than there is altogether in Washington, D.C.
Oh, yeah.
And I started out at Buena Vista College and ended up at Drake, and then I went to Washington, D.C. because I wanted to work for my state alongside of Senator Chuck Grassley in the U.S. Senate. And I just recently left my job as his chief of staff fighting for Iowa in the U.S. Senate, and I've seen up close, Jamie, I've seen the beast of Washington up close, and I've seen what works, I've seen what doesn't work, and more things don't work out there. But I've always kept that Iowa outside perspective, and I've been there. Mm-hmm. I am ready to serve on day one.
That is an advantage that you do bring to this race. You have been there. You've walked the halls. You've dealt with these other senators. You've dealt with their staff members. You've seen legislation come across the desk of Senator Chuck Grassley, and undoubtedly you have advised him on many of the public policy issues that are coming up for a vote, coming up for an amendment, a debate, perhaps on the floor of the Senate. So what are those essential qualities besides experience on the Hill that you also bring to this Senate race?
Well, I just bring a knowledge of Iowa. You know, when you work in an office for Iowans, with Iowans every day, and you are on the phone with Iowans, and you are meeting with Iowans, hearing about their troubles with the IRS, hearing about their troubles with the Department of Justice, the USDA, whatever it is, you know how to penetrate the government. And then I know where to go, and I know the tools in the Senate to use on behalf of Iowans. And I see 3 things really wrong with Washington, D.C., 3 things that I really want to tackle. And that's the budget deficit, the jobs deficit, and the trust deficit, Jamie.
When we talk about the trust deficit, which is usually what you focus on last, I think I want to reserve a little bit more time for you to talk about that. Could you briefly touch on the jobs deficit and the financial deficit, the budget deficit and the jobs deficit, and then go immediately to the deficit of trust? You
bet. You know, that budget deficit we have, our debt is $17 trillion, and that's embarrassing. And you can blame both sides, Republican and Democrat. You know, I supported Republican presidents, but I sure wish George W. Bush would have vetoed some spending bills.
Yes.
And sometimes the Republican Congress spent a little bit too much, or even more maybe, than Democrats. And, you know, we need to not budget the way we budget. Our budgeting anymore is you give the agencies what they got last year, and you give them a little more, and there's no accountability. There's no oversight, and what we need to do is zero-based budgeting, and that is happening with states. What you do, Jamie, is you assume that the IRS, the EPA, the Department of Justice, that they start with $0 in their accounts, and you make them come up to Congress in front of the committees, and you make them beg.
Absolutely.
You make them justify for every dollar they're going to get, so you can make sure they're not using it for sinister programs like Fast and Furious, where one of our own dies as a result of our DOJ selling guns to drug lords in Mexico. Mm-hmm. You make sure that the EPA isn't going to use money to try to regulate dust or put drones over our farms. And so that's how we can get some real accountability. And we also need a constitutional amendment to balance the budget. I mean, 49 states, by state statute or state constitutional amendment, they balance their budget. We need to do the same thing.
When you talk about a jobs deficit, this is something that's been in the minds of many Americans for several years now, almost from the day Obama took office. We see some jobs being created in certain places like North Dakota's oil fields, and of course Texas has been a state at creating a lot of jobs. But most of America right now is hurting with a jobs deficit. Talk to us about that.
Well, if we can pass this Keystone Pipeline, which is not even a taxpayer-funded project, our manufacturing in Spencer, Iowa, will start manufacturing new equipment and start hiring people right away. You know, the president says that Keystone will create 50 jobs, maybe 2,000. His own State Department, he needs to read his own State Department's documents, says 42,000 jobs. So we need to start passing common sense legislation that passes that gives us jobs. But then we do something like Obamacare, which is causing employers to drop employees from full-time to part-time, and that's less money in the part-time workers' hands for their families. So that's why the economy is just hiccuping along. And no one understands Obamacare, and it's about time somebody read that bill in the administration and delayed the employer mandate. I'd like to get rid of the individual mandate, and I'd like to just repeal this bill altogether.
Yes, absolutely. Now go with the last 3 minutes that we have you for. And by the way, listeners need to know that David Young is on his way to an event, and this is why we can't have him for the whole half hour of this particular program. So we're doing the best we can to get as much exposure of all three of our guests today as possible. So David, in the last 3 minutes that we have, you talk to us about the trust deficit, because you've really been hammering this on the stump.
We hear about all these scandals, and I don't care what party a government official is in when they abuse the trust that they are given by the taxpayer in our republic. Our president says these scandals as of late are phony. They are not phony. Tell Brian Terry's family, who died as a result of Fast and Furious with our own guns, that this is a phony scandal. It is not phony. In Benghazi, 4 patriots died. That is not phony. The IRS is intimidating and infiltrating conservative groups. I don't care if they're, if it's liberal groups, we should be just as upset. And you know what? There are tools that we have, Jamie, called oversight and investigation tactics, and our founding fathers gave them to us. And a lot of people talk about getting in this race, and I'm going to introduce this bill and this amendment and do this on day one. Well, I know the reality, and that's not possible. But oversight investigations, we can hold the hearing, we can write the letter, we can shame government officials regardless of which party, and we can use the tools within the Senate, holding nominations, withholding funds, and we can go after them. We have to restore faith in our government by our republic, and I will be an equal opportunity watchdog and ferret these nefarious acts out.
Sure.
And you know what? At the end of every bill as well that we pass, we need to make sure that it's subject to a public audit so we know what these funds are going for. And we need to also sunset legislation.
Mm-hmm.
We pass bills and they last forever. We need to sunset legislation. If it's worthy of reauthorizing, but let's have the debate. And if it's rotten legislation that's hampering our economy or infringing on our freedoms, we need to ditch it.
Absolutely. I like it. I'm digging it, David. Sounds great. How can people get a hold of you?
They can go to youngforiowa.com and follow me at youngforiowa on Twitter. And I am all around the state, so they can follow me around the state if they want. But
youngforiowa.com.
You bet.
And what is your Twitter account?
At Young for Iowa.
At Young for Iowa. Well, thanks so much, David. Have a good event that you're going to right now. I'm sure you'll meet a lot of great people there. It's always great to shake hands and be asked the tough questions, isn't it?
Well, it is, and it's important to answer these questions. You know, there's something that's been up lately that I want to talk about, and that's Syria, and I've got a few more minutes. And that reminds us, we've been watching the news. I heard it on your commercial break and in the papers. This reminds us just how dangerous this world is and the threats that are out there. And it's so important to have a strong national defense. And I am a ready military, and I am anxious to hear the President's plan, but he can't go it alone. We must have a vigorous debate within Congress. Congress has a role with the War Powers Clause. We have 3 branches of government. Not a unilateral decision needs to be made here. And the bottom line is we need leadership by a president, not just abroad, but at home. And it reminds me of a quote from Admiral Mullen. He says, former chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he says the most significant threat to our national security is our debt. So we have issues here at home, domestically and abroad, and we need leadership everywhere, and I will lead in the United States Senate. I'm ready to serve, Jamie.
Well, thanks so much, David. Good luck to you out there. Keep going from county to county. It's exciting as you approach your 99th county. So let's keep in touch, okay?
You bet, and then I'll do it all over again.
Okay, sounds good. Well, you trained under a guy who knows all about going to the counties.
Well, it's an important way to keep in contact with your fellow Iowans. You got to get in front of them. They want to look you in the eye. You got to talk to them.
Absolutely. Well, good luck, David. Have a good evening. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
David.